Hi everyone, it's Vanita and welcome back to the One Moment Rule podcast. This week's a little bit different. It's a solo episode from me and I wanted it to feel like a really honest conversation, a little bit like a voice note actually, and I think it's about something that many of us will quietly understand. Today's episode is about why do we struggle to let go of someone even when we know it's over? And I think this one is hard because it's not always that we don't know. Sometimes we do know. We know that the relationship has changed, the friendship doesn't feel the same, and the person isn't really showing up in the way we need. We know that that pattern keeps repeating, and sadly we know it's probably done. But then there's just another part of us that hasn't caught up yet. That part that still checks the phone and wonders, oh, maybe they'll message, or, rereading those old WhatsApp conversations. And maybe it's just still looking at their profile and saying, oh, I'm just quickly checking. Which is never just checking quickly, is it? Let's be honest. You go in for 1 second and then suddenly you're just analysing a caption or checking who liked what and maybe wondering if a song lyric means something. And you just basically become this detective that's not getting paid. And I honestly say that because I get it. I really, really do. That urge to just kind of know or check and see whether they've moved on or whether they'll miss you or if there's something there. And it feels really strong in the moment. And then afterwards, half the time, you just don't feel better about it. All that's happened is you have more information to overthink. So if you've ever thought, why am I still like this? Or why am I still thinking about this? Or, oh my God, what's wrong? Why can't I just let it go? I don't want you to listen to this episode and think that you're failing, because you're really not failing. You're human. Letting go doesn't mean you suddenly stop caring. It doesn't mean you wake up one day and feel absolutely nothing. And it doesn't mean you never miss them or never think about them or never have a wobble. I mean, we're not robots. Sometimes letting go just starts much, much smaller than that. And it starts with one moment where you don't check. One moment where you don't send the message. One moment where you let the feeling pass without letting it pull you back into the same cycle. And those moments count. Even if nobody else sees them, they really do count. One thing I've noticed is that when we miss someone, our mind can be really selective. It doesn't always show us the full picture. It shows us the nice bit. The times that they made us laugh and made us feel wanted, or where they really seem to get us, when you're having a bad day and they just seem to be sitting there listening to you and hearing you and you think, oh my God, wow, that's the version of them that made us think, this is why I stayed. And then the other parts get a bit blurred. Those not very nice times where you get confused and you feel like they're making you hang around and you don't really know where you stand with them. That makes you feel anxious. Or all the times where you've had to make excuses for them for the same thing and, your friends are pointing them out, but you think, oh, no, it's not that, it's not this. And again, the same patterns are repeating. It's like your mind just creates this highlights reel. It's very dramatic music, soft lighting, but all the best moments. And you're watching it thinking, oh, maybe it wasn't that bad. But then you have to gently remind yourself, the good moments were real. They were definitely real and you should never ignore those. But they weren't the whole story. And I think that's really important because when we're trying to let go, people can sometimes be too harsh. They'll say, oh, why do you miss them? They weren't good for you. Or don't you remember all those times that they did X, Y, Z? But it's not always that simple. You can miss someone who hurt you or who wasn't consistent, and you can miss someone and still know the relationship wasn't right. Those things can exist at the same time. But I think we have to stop shaming ourselves for that, because missing someone doesn't automatically mean you should go back. It might mean that your system is just adjusting to not having them there anymore, and that adjustment can feel horrible. It can feel like emptiness and panic and, oh my God, I just feel so lonely now. What do I do with this space? But that space will not always feel as loud as it does in the beginning. And just for a second, I want you to really hold on to that. Because that space that feels unbearable at first does start to soften. And not all at once and not overnight, let's be honest. It does take time. But slowly your energy starts coming back to you. Your attention starts coming back to you. Those evenings become yours again. And that's the part we don't talk about enough. Because letting go isn't just about losing someone, it's also about getting yourself back. I think another reason we struggle to let go because we're not letting go of the person, we're letting go of what we hoped it would become or what would happen. And sometimes that's the bit that hurts the most, because maybe you just weren't holding on to them. Maybe you were holding on to the version of the relationship you thought it could become. And just to be clear, this isn't just about a relationship. This is going to be about friendships or maybe something with a family member. So those things, could be that apology that you wanted never came, the conversation where they might have understood you finally, or the moment where they come back and say, oh, I realise now, the future you imagined, the version of them that you keep seeing glimpses of. And those glimpses can keep you stuck because you think, oh, they can be so lovely. And I'm sure they can. Everybody has a good side. Maybe there were moments where they were and it felt good. But maybe there were moments where you thought, this is it. This is the version I knew was there. But then the question becomes, is it their pattern or is it the part you keep waiting for? Because there's a difference. And I've had to sit with that in different ways in my own life. That feeling of, but it could have been so good, or, it would have been just good if they communicated better, or if they had changed or understood me, or if they just chose me properly. And the painful thing is that could have been can feel so real, but it's not the same as what actually was. So when you feel pulled back, maybe just ask yourself, am I missing what happened, or am I missing what I hoped would happen? Because that question can tell you a lot. And it's not about judging yourself. It's just about being honest. Because sometimes we're not grieving the relationship exactly as it was. We're grieving the version we kept hoping it would become. And that deserves kindness. You're not silly for hoping or weak for wanting it to work. You have to remember your peace can't live in a future that's a forever, that's a potential. And at some point you deserve something that's real and consistent and present, and not something that you're constantly waiting to become real. Closure is another big part of this, because I think a lot of us say, I just need closure, and I get that, I really do. When something ends badly or really quietly or just confusing and you don't have a proper conversation, it can just leave your mind spinning. I've had that before where, I've been really good friends with someone and slowly you feel this drift, but you just think, oh, it's because maybe they're busy, or, you have things going on and you have this sort of intermittent communication. And then one day it just goes really silent and you don't quite understand because you haven't argued, you haven't had a disagreement, or, there's no elephant in the room to address. So it can really leave your mind wandering. So you think, oh, if I could just understand why, then I'd be fine. Or if they just, be honest and admit something's happened, then I could just move on. And sometimes, yes, you should have a respectful conversation, which can help. But sometimes that's not always what happens and you don't always get that. But I also think closure can become another way of staying attached. Because if you have one more conversation, it becomes one more thing to analyse. And then one more answer leads to another question. Then you're thinking, okay, but then what did they mean by that? So now that final conversation you needed, you've had about, 12 episodes and a spin-off series. And I say that really kindly because I think we've all had moments where we've convinced ourselves that just sending one more message or having one more phone call will solve it. Because you're trying to do something respectfully, and maybe that's not the other person's intention. And it's not to say that they're trying to be intentionally hurtful towards you, but maybe that's just not what they need. So they're happy to just close something off without having to talk about it. And sometimes what we're actually calling closure is hope. Hoping that they'll just say that thing that we need and that they'll understand, and that the hurt that we felt will feel worth it because we've got closure. But the hard truth is that we don't always get a neat ending. We don't always get that apology or a full explanation of what happened. And sometimes their actions have already given us information, but we're just waiting for those words to make it hurt less. But we all have to remember that actions do speak louder than words. And this is a bit that really gets me, because sometimes you already know, you just don't like what you know. And again, that's just really human. There's no shame in wanting someone to make sense of the pain that they caused, but healing can't always depend on someone else explaining themselves perfectly. Because what happens if they never do? What happens if they just don't have the words? and they just avoid it. Some people are of that personality. I'm not a psychologist as such, but there's books that I've read where, some people are more avoidant in their personality, so they just don't maybe know what to say, or they just think it's better if they don't address it. And sometimes from our side, if they even give you an answer, it might not even feel like enough. So at some point you have to ask, is this conversation going to help me heal, or is it just going to put me back in the waiting room? Because that's what it can feel like. You're not with them, but you're not free either, and you're just waiting and hanging around, for them to realise and explain to you, maybe waiting to see if they miss you. And that waiting could just take so much energy from you. So maybe the shift isn't, I don't need closure, because maybe you still want it. Maybe the shift is, I can want closure, but I don't have to keep chasing it from someone who just may never be able to give it to me. And that just feels more honest and more human. There's also the routine. I think this gets missed. So when someone leaves your life, you don't lose the emotional connection. Well, you don't just lose that. You also lose the routine of them being there. So the person you messaged or called when something happened, and maybe you've had a bad day at work, or someone's annoyed you and you just need to tell them about it, or the person you sent a funny meme to or something, and in the morning you wake up and you just expect that there's always going to be a message from them. I mean, this is just a person who you just expect to be in your day somehow. Again, this could just be a really close friend of yours, someone that you're dating, someone you're in a relationship with, or someone you have any sort of connection with. Even if it was complicated and maybe was a bit toxic and not fully healthy, they had a space in your life, in your day. And when that space becomes empty, that's why it feels really loud. And the evenings can be hard, or weekends. Let's say you were seeing someone and every week you'd make sure you went on a date night, or, you had a friend who you'd catch up for a coffee, and, that would usually be on like a Sunday morning after you've, been for a run or something. And so that's now gone from your routine, and it can feel like, I miss them. Or maybe you do miss them, but maybe you also miss the habit of them. So maybe you just miss the habit of them, that familiar place that they had in your life, almost being like a comfort blanket, that you didn't consciously know was there, but it was there. So instead of judging yourself for that, just notice it and say, well, okay, this is the time I'd usually want a message, or the time I'd usually check if I had a message. And then ask yourself, what can I do with this moment instead? And it's more in like a caring way, but you don't have to, I'm not saying you have to light a candle or journal for 40 minutes and then you become a new person by 9 p.m. It's literally just like putting the phone down, going to get a drink, maybe a glass of water or coffee, maybe even send yourself a voice note or write yourself a note in your notes in your phone. Or maybe just message someone who, is still in your life, but you don't feel like you have a very kind of smooth, secure connection with them where it's not going to make you wonder what's happening. Maybe just take yourself out for a walk, or if you can't go for a walk because it's sometime in the evening, take yourself out of the room that you're in and change the environment. It sounds really, really basic, but sometimes it's just basic that needs you to stop reopening that wound. And the aim is to never miss them. That's just not possible as humans. Like, you are going to have a trigger somewhere where you're going to think of that person. And so the aim isn't to let every moment of them missing them become an action that pulls you backwards. Sometimes the win isn't, I'm completely over it. Sometimes the win is, I wanted to check and I waited 10 minutes. Or I wrote the message but I didn't send it. Or I missed them but I didn't turn that feeling into an action that would then hurt me or make me overthink. So all these little things count, and there are also things that you should probably write down as well. And it may not look dramatic from the outside, but inside that is you choosing differently. And this is where the 1 moment rule comes in, because the 1 moment here is usually very small. It's not always that big emotional breakdown of, getting piles and piles of tissues and, sitting there and being upset, which, by the way, you are allowed to sit there and be upset and grab a tissue. It's about the second before you check their profile, the second before you send that message, the second before you reread the chat, the second before you convince yourself that this time it will feel different. That's the moment. And in that moment, you don't have to attack yourself. Don't go, oh my God, I'm so stupid. Why am I like this? That doesn't help, because trust me, I've done that and I've said all those things. It really doesn't help. If anything, it just makes you feel all those things and feel it really deeply. Instead, just pause and ask, what am I hoping this gives me? Will it give me reassurance, or am I hoping it proves I still matter and that it gives me closure? Am I hoping that they've posted something and that means that they'll miss me? So then ask yourself, will this actually help me heal or put me back in the same loop? Because sometimes the thing we want to do feels comforting for about, 10 seconds, and then painful for the rest of the day. Checking might just feel like relief in a moment, but then you see something or you don't see something and then suddenly your mood's dropped. So let's say you send a message and you might feel like, oh great, I sent that message that I've been wanting to send for days. But then what happens? You're waiting for the reply. Or they might have sent the reply, but now you're reading into the reply and you're thinking, oh, I feel worse now because the reply isn't what you hoped it would be. So here the shift might be, I can want to message and still not send it, and you can still miss that person and just not check your phone. And that's the kind of thing that I would and have said to myself, just as a way to hold myself steady, and also trying to hold yourself accountable, because sometimes you need a sentence that just helps you get through the urge. And I always say to people, sometimes I talk to myself, and some people just look at me and think that's really strange. And what I mean by that is, it's not about, if you're not somebody that writes things down, you can just say it to yourself, whether it be in not out loud, but if you need to do it out loud, do it out loud. So don't say I need to let go forever, because that can feel huge. Just for today, just say I'm not going to check. Or for the next 20 minutes, I'm just going to put my phone down. And I'm going to choose what protects me, because that's more doable. One moment is possible, and you can do one moment. What I will say is that if you do want to message, one thing that helps is writing in your notes first. And I know everybody says that, but it genuinely can help, because half the time you don't actually need to send it. You just need to get it out of your body. So write the message, and it's not the perfect version. It's just the messy, whatever it kind of looks like version, without thinking too much about it. And before you send it, ask yourself, if I was maybe doing a role play, what are you hoping that they'll say back? And that question changes a lot of things, because if you're hoping they'll finally understand you or apologize or say, oh, I choose you, and it gives you that peace, then sending that message may not give you what you need, because it's based on hoping. And you may just end up handing your peace back to them. And I'm not trying to say that in a harsh way. I've done all these different things before, which is why I'm saying it. But where you think, if they just reply in the right way, I'll feel better, and then you realize you've made your peace dependent on someone else responding how you need. And that's a really risky place to put yourself. Another thing that helps is telling the whole truth. Because when you miss someone, your mind can get really nostalgic and think of all those romantic times. So I like the idea of having two truths. So it's not a perfect list, but just two truths, like I miss them, and also saying I didn't feel secure with them. Saying I miss talking to them, and then saying I was anxious a lot of the time. So you're kind of giving those two versions. You're not ignoring one and looking at the other, and vice versa. And that's not trying to make them be the villain by saying some of the negatives. It's about saying, well, the good was real, but the pain that I had too was real. And if you only let yourself remember the good, then of course you'll want to go back. That's normal. So when you feel like you're getting pulled into something like that, maybe just say, okay, let me remember the whole thing. And it's not to be horrible or punish yourself. It's just to keep yourself grounded. And it's being grounded that keeps you level-headed and helps you to heal, and not be angry or bitter and, not pretending that you don't care. You're just being honest. I think also sometimes we keep checking or holding on because we want proof that we mattered. And this is a big one, and it's something I have felt has been big for me in the past. So it's not always that you want them to be back in your life. It's more like, I just want to know that it meant something, or that I meant something, and that it couldn't have been that easy to forget about me, and that I wasn't replaced. And it's a really vulnerable thing to admit. And there would have been a time where I wouldn't wanted to admit that, but I have been in places where I have probably felt like that. So I can say it now, but I have been through my own journey. And it's not really about them. It's more of a deeper issue. And it's to do with self-worth and rejection and the fear of being rejected and being forgettable. So if that's something that you feel, I honestly just want to say, wanting to know you mattered is honestly so human. But their ability to show it may not be the measure of your worth. And it sounds easy to say out loud and really hard to actually feel it. But it's really important, because some people will not give you the reassurance you're looking for. And it's not because you don't matter, but because they don't have the emotional capacity, maturity, or just the courage to give that to you. And if you keep going back to someone who can't give you that reassurance, then you may just keep hurting yourself trying to extract something from them that they don't have. And remember, it's not what I said, it's about what I said before, where it's not someone intentionally doing it. It could also just be someone that doesn't know how to do it. So take that moment to ask yourself, am I going back because this person is safe for me? Or am I going back because I want them to prove I was worth being in their life? And that's a really hard question, but it can actually help you give that closure that we talked about, because you don't have to keep asking someone else to confirm what your healing is asking you to remember, because you did matter. Even if they didn't do things properly and they just moved on differently or never gave you that closure you wanted, you still mattered. So if you're in this right now, maybe the first step isn't just let go forever. That can feel too big. Maybe it's, okay, today I won't check. Tonight I won't send that message. And it sounds small, but it matters, because letting go is often built through tiny decisions. And let's just say you do check and you do message or have a wobble. Don't shame yourself for that either. Just come back to the present and say, okay, what did I need in that moment? Maybe you needed some reassurance, or you were having a bad day and, you were within your thoughts in a quiet space, and maybe you were a bit tired, and so your mind ran in places, and you wanted something to make you feel better, and that kind of brought back the whole proof of being, that you still mattered. So that's helpful information, because then the next time the urge comes, you can meet the need differently. I know when you're in it, it can feel like you'll always feel this way. Like, oh my God, I'll always miss them. Or I'll always wonder, feel that pull, compare everything back to them. But honestly, you won't feel it as strongly. Like, time heals, and it's so true. The feelings will pass, the urges will pass, the space that feels really unbearable will actually feel better. And one day, the time you used to spend waiting for them, checking on them, the time actually becomes yours, where you're actually doing things for yourself. And this is the part I really want you to hold on to. That letting go isn't about losing someone, it's about getting yourself back too. Your peace, your energy, your attention, and your ability to just feel okay without needing one person to make you feel okay. And I'm not going to sit here and say it happens all at once, because it doesn't. But it does happen slowly if you be consistent, take it moment by moment. So the question for this episode isn't just, why can't I let go? Maybe it's actually, what am I still hoping this person will give me? Is it love? Is it closure? An apology? The future you imagined? And then when you've thought about all these things, maybe ask yourself after, can I start giving myself some of that back? And I don't need somebody else to do that. And you can do that. So if you're listening to this and you're trying to let go of someone, I want you to know this. You can do it. Not because it doesn't hurt and not because you won't miss them, but because every time you pause, every time you choose not to reopen the wound, every time you come back to yourself instead of chasing the same answer, you're building trust with yourself again. Thank you once again for listening to the One Moment Rule podcast. If this episode really resonated with you, or you know somebody that would really benefit listening to this, then share it with them. And also leave us a comment, or come and send us a message on Instagram and just let us know maybe what's one small moment that helped you start letting go. I really hope this episode was helpful to you. me and Mum will both see you next week for the next episode.